Why not Unity, Unreal, or Godot, or really any other game engine out there? I guess I just like make my life hard. Some people just want to make a game. Well, I want to make a game engine. Why not Rust? Skill issue. I'm not that good. Well, okay. Let's be honest. I did give Rust a shot. I tried making a game engine in Rust. It didn't go that well. So I threw it in the garbage. But again, this isn't a Rust versus Zig video, but drop a comment if you want to see that. So I'm making this devlog series. I want to walk you guys through me making my game engine. I want it to be publicly documented. I want to teach people more about game engines, how to make it, teach people Zig. And I just want this to be a pretty cool series. Again, so like really, why Zig? Well, I had heard about Zig a few years ago, and that was about it. I didn't really do anything with it. I knew the language existed, but I neglected it. But then I had the great, idea that nobody else has ever had of making my own game engine. And I want to do something unique. I didn't want to use C or C++. That's been done. That's out there. I tried Rust. Like I said, didn't work out. It's okay. Then I had that. And then I had the idea. Zig. Zig seemed great. It was very high performance, interoperable with C or C++. But I was pretty skeptical. It hadn't hit 1.0. Kind of just seemed a little weird to me. But I gave it a shot. I started learning. There wasn't very much out there to learn or make a game engine in Zig. There was some stuff, and I kept trying and learning, and that's what led me to also start this YouTube channel. Might as well make a game engine, and might as well teach people how to make a game engine in Zig. That's why I made the tutorial series on making a game engine in Zig. Go check it out if you haven't. I wanted content that people could enjoy and consume and learn how to make a game engine in Zig. Okay, but I'm getting a little sidetracked. Again, why Zig in the first place? One thing with game engines, I'm going to keep this scope with game engines, is just how well it interoperates with C and C++. There's not very many good resources out there for Zig and game engines. There's not very many libraries. There's not a lot of stuff out there, but there's so much out there with C and C++. Being able to just pull in a C dependency like lat or glfw and just start using it in the Zig code, that just makes the entry into Zig programming or making a game engine in Zig so much easier. You can honestly follow any C or C++ tutorial out there, and just as long as you know some Zig and you're learning Zig, just write the code in Zig instead, and anytime it's using a dependency, you can use that dependency. If you do want to hear 5 more reasons why I think you should learn Zig, go check out the video. Definitely don't have an outdated bad take in there. That could never be me.
If you look at Bun, it was just acquired by Anthropic. They're at the forefront of AI, and they care about Bun, which means they care about Zig.
Okay, but again, I said this was a devlog, so I'm sure you're sick of me talking and you see the engine right there. Well, let's go dive into it and see the state. And we're in our game engine. So if we look around, we can kind of move around, look at our scene, and look right in our viewport. But because this is the first devlog, I really want to get into what is the current state of our engine, where are we at, what's next. But first, I want to show you this architecture diagram. So I split the editor, and again, we're going to get into the runtime, but I split the editor just into actions, views, and gameplay. And if we look under actions, we see create and load project files. And heading back to the editor, what does that look like? Well, we see we have new project and open project. So that's being able to create projects and open them. So if we just take a look, we can open this other project, press OK, and now we're in a completely different project with different scenes and different assets and everything like that. The next thing we split into is views. We have the scene hierarchy on the left over here. And then of course we have the asset explorer down here, which as we can see, we can navigate our different assets and scenes. And the biggest thing here is the viewport. As we can see, we have the viewport, which is actually our current scene that we're looking at. And then the entity inspector, which that is one of the next things I need to add. It's the biggest thing that's lacking in this UI right now. But I want to dive back into scenes for a second. So we can see we have different scenes down here. And right now we're in this monkey scene, which is our default scene. But then if we go look at griffin.scene, we see we have a completely different scene. We're able to just very quickly double click, switch between scenes. And then the last section I've broken down is gameplay. So this is actually what happens in our editor of how we can play the game. So the first thing we can see is right now we're in our kind of editor controls, where this is an editor camera where I can position it where I want. Let's say I'm looking down at this backpack, but now when I press play, we see it's changed views, right? And this is the game. So right now the game logic is being able to move around with WASD. But if I try and move around like I had before of trying to position the camera, that doesn't work because that logic is purely for the actual engine. So if we press pause, we see here, now it's back to that editor camera, and I can go back, move around. If I press WASD, it doesn't work. And if I press play again, it just resumes where we were. And as soon as you press stop, it resets the entire scene. So if we press play again, we see we're right back at the very start. But what is happening behind the scenes? So if we move over to runtime, we can see there's this whole pipeline of how the game engine is actually doing stuff behind the scenes. And the first thing I want to dive into is project files. So we saw that at the start, how we can create projects and open projects, right? But what is a project? So whenever we create a new project, we're creating this .zephyr folder. And within that, we create the project file. And what this looks like is we can see we have the format, which is the .proj, and it's all just JSON. But then we have the name, we have a project ID, and then very importantly, we have our assets and scenes directories. So this is metadata telling the game, this is where all the assets for the game are. This is where all the scenes for the game are. So now the runtime, it has this metadata. It can just go load all those assets, load all the scenes, or get the scenes ready. We also have a default scene, which we see when you open up the scene, or when you open up the project or the game, this is where it starts. So let's first dive into scenes. Again, scenes are just metadata, or it's files. And let's open one up. We're going to open up the exact one we just saw, which is the backpack. And if we look here, we see we have just a bunch of metadata. So we have that project ID, which is exactly referencing the project we just had. A scene's going to have its own ID, and then it's going to have other metadata. So what's the active camera? We have entities, that's an entity component system. So what are the entities of the scene? We have a camera, and then we also have the backpack. And then we can see different fields. So this one is the transform, this one is the rotation. Now that we've looked at scenes, let's move into the asset pipeline. I have a whole video of how to integrate our asset pipeline that we use here. It's called Zimp. It's a package that I created. And what it does is, let's say we want to run a game. We see we opened it, but if we look right here, there's a lot of stuff going on, but this is our asset pipeline. So what happened is Zimp, our asset package, it found 33 assets, 5 meshes, 8 textures, 6 shaders, and 12 materials. It builds a dependency graph, and then it cooks all of them into a format that our engine can consume and knows about. So they're all custom formats I've written. But we can see in this case, because they've already been built, everything's cached, nothing new got cooked. And the next thing we're going to move on to is ECS. So if you haven't heard about ECS, it's a giant topic. Definitely go learn more if you don't know anything, but it stands for Entity Component System. And what it does is it allows us to kind of write our gameplay logic and just have a whole world constructed full of entities. I remember back when we were looking at our scene files here, well, they had components. And this is the C in ECS, Entity Component System. And what does that look like? All we saw were like type IDs and things like that. Well, that actually references this ID right here. Looking back at the scene for backpack, we see we have number 1, number 3. That references 1 and 3, so position and scale. And what this allows is our scene to overwrite these position and scale vectors aside from the defaults, which are 0 and 1. So if that's a C in ECS, what about the E, the entity? It's the exact same thing. These are all our entities. So when we say we have an entity, we can attach components to an entity. An entity is really just an ID. At the end of the day, it's just an ID, but what makes them special is being able to attach the components we just saw. So when our scene gets loaded, it spawns all the entities and attaches the components to them. This is a system, so a keyboard movement. Remember how we had WASD? Well, this is exactly what it is. We see we have a world, which a world is all those spawn entities with components attached. And we can query the world. If we look right here, we see we're querying everything that has a transform component, and then we're reading this keyboard movement component. So we're going to be able to move anything with the transform component because we're writing to it. And then we see we get that transform. And at the start, we got the keyboard direction. So like, are they pressing W, ASD, all those things. And then we just add the movement and potential rotations to it. And moving out of ECS world, we move into our render, which obviously is one of the most important things to any game engine because that's what renders everything. And looking back at our editor, we see anything in the viewport is being rendered by a renderer, right? The render really is just a system. We see we have a mesh render component, which now our render system, going back to ECS, queries everything that's renderable or has this mesh render component. So we put an asset onto this component, and then the renderer is able to get that asset and render it. And what's next for the game engine? Well, there's one really big issue that I have right now with it, and it's the fact that maybe, just maybe, all the game code is in the editor, What do I mean by that? So anytime we want to change the game, or like when you press play, like we saw, and you move around WSD, anytime you want to make any changes to that logic, we have to recompile the whole editor. Yeah, so we're gonna fix that. And it's actually a really hard problem. It can be simple. We can do some simple stuff, like we can easily just pull into its own game package and then have the editor import the game package. But again, you'd still need to recompile the whole editor to be able to play your changes. And we don't want that. We want to give the editor the capability of building all the game code within the editor while the editor is running and rerunning it instantly. So this is obviously how Unreal and Unity work. You press play, it's going to compile all your scripts, your game code, everything, and then it'll play it in the viewport. So right now we have the playing part going. We can play, pause, stop as we saw, but we want that compilation. And there's a lot that needs to be done with that. I have a whole plan. It's going to happen. I won't get into how to do it because I want to make that whole video in itself. If you want to see that, if that sounds interesting to you, please subscribe, like the video, and let me know what you guys' thoughts are. I really think this is going to be a fun series going forward. I want to be able to show off where we're at and use it as a motivating factor for the tutorial series to show you guys like what we can truly do and where we're going and where the direction is. And if you just want to see the code, everything's open source. It's always going to be in the description. And if you want to come chat, there's also a Discord link down in the description. Bye.